Hi everybody, this is Mark Brower, and I just finished my last video for the Renewed Man coaching program. And I wanted to share with you something that came up in this video that I was doing, and I thought would be helpful for everyone. So the Renewed Man program, we're talking about steps or keys to being a renewed man, like spiritually, emotionally renewed, and living with sexual self-control. And the last key in this system or this grouping of things that I think are all important to be working on. The last key in this program is vigilance, staying vigilant, keeping your foot on the accelerator in the process of your own personal growth and keep paying attention to your integrity on various issues. Now, whenever I talk about this, like in a workshop setting or whatever, I will talk about the process of growth and in recovery, like in terms of mental health issues, in terms of addiction and recovery. And I can pretty much guarantee that at somewhere along the line, someone's going to raise their hand and they're going to say, well, especially in Christian settings now, they're going to say, well, what about God's healing? What about the fact that you're talking about all this stuff we're supposed to do? Where's the place for God to just heal somebody and then you've had this problem and God's healed you and then you don't have it anymore? And so there is that's a mindset, particularly in certain Christian settings, that if we can go to God and seek healing from God for our problem, then that should happen, whether it happens instantaneously or not. It should fix, the problem should be fixed, and then once it's fixed, it should stay fixed. So this idea of staying vigilant over the long term almost feels like defeat because we're saying that we really haven't been healed. And I have a couple of responses to that. So the first is that I believe that's a misunderstanding of how healing works. It's this mindset that if I have a problem and I look to God to bring healing, then God will do that. And then it's done. And I'm sort of like the passive experiencer, it just happens to me. And I will tell you that I don't believe that that's faith. I think that's magical thinking. Magical thinking is when we believe we can just do our thing and then God just fixes stuff without our involvement or participation in any way. And I don't think it works that way. There's a role that God plays in doing things in our lives. But then there's also a calling for us to do our part in it. Even when Jesus healed people, it was instantaneous, miraculous healing, yes, but even in that case, in those situations, he would often ask them to do something as part of their healing, to go see the priest, to go visit someone, to do this, to take up your mat and walk or whatever. And it was in the process of them doing their part that the healing came. And the process of healing from emotional and mental health things and behavioral things like addictions, there's steps that we take in the process of that. And if we don't do our thing, if we're not obedient to take the steps that we need to take, then it is like unfair for us to just sort of sit back and imagine that God's just going to do it all for us. It doesn't work that way. That would be unhealthy for us. It would be unhelpful for us if God would do that magical stuff for us. So part of this healing journey that we're on is a journey because there's a role that we have to play in it. So that's one thing. But then the other thing is that time, life unfolds, and a lot of these things, it takes time for us to develop the skills. It takes time for us to rebalance our neurochemistry. It takes time for us, for our minds to be renewed, to be transformed, like the Apostle Paul talks about in Romans 12, that we should not be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of our minds. Well, that takes a while for those patterns to get transformed. And so this is how I like to encourage people to envision what healing looks like, what recovery looks like over time. So imagine if you can go back to, if you drive a car, imagine going back to that time when you were learning how to drive a car. Remember how challenging that was, maybe even how stressful it was. As you're doing this, you have all of these things going on when you're learning how to drive, and you're getting behind the wheel and you're so aware of all the potential problems and all the dangers. And, if you turn the wheel over just a little bit this way, you could run into the traffic coming the other way and you could actually die. If you turn the other way, you could, drive into the ditch and wreck your car. All this stuff and things to, potential cars coming in front of you to be aware of. So it's very stressful. And you're like hyper aware. You can drive that car, but it takes a lot of your time and energy and focus, or rather your energy and focus as you're doing it. And it can be very stressful and challenging to do. And in that process, you're not very good at it, right? Because you're still learning. Well, as time goes on, you build up your skill. You grow in your experience, right? And what that means then, as years progress, you find yourself coming to this place where you're able to drive, and it's the same scenario where the dangerous traffic coming the other way is still just a turn of your steering wheel away from disaster. The ditch is still there. It's still a danger for you to fall in. But you're not like stressed out and overwhelmed by the challenge. You're able to drive safely and successfully without it being like overwhelming, right? And I think that's the journey of recovery, that even as time goes on and a person grows and changes and there's transformation that happens in their lives, the possibility of falling off the path is still there. Whether that be, an alcoholic, it's still possible to start drinking again. It's still possible to start overeating again. It's still possible for someone who deals with sexual, compulsive habits to fall off that path. All the time in our world, there are these temptations available to us. There are these opportunities and challenges that come in our lives that in the past might have pushed us off the path, right? So that still happens, but what happens is over time then, we gain more skill, we gain more of the ability to adapt to those things, so that instead of like the first-time driver who's freaking out and probably runs into a pole because they're not able to manage it all well, we get to do that a lot better. And that's the goal for long-term recovery, long-term healing. God does God's work in our lives. We respond and take the steps that we're called to take. And over time, that healing comes and it gets stronger and stronger. But again, it's lived out over time. Well, I hope that helps. And if you want to find out more about this Renewed Man program, there's a link in the notes below. And thanks for watching.